Hello, and thank you very much for tuning in. I'm here in Dublin to talk to Walter Ryan-Purcell. But before we begin our conversation, I'd just like you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I need 1,000 subscribers in order to be able to go out live on YouTube, and that will enable me to get to an audience beyond Facebook. It's completely free. You will never ever be asked for money, and I will put up the details of how to subscribe to the YouTube channel after this live feed. So, about a month ago, I got a phone call one morning from Walter, and he said to me, Anna, you know, the stuff that you're putting up is very negative, and it's tough reading it, and you are in grave danger of people just switching off. You're constantly feeding them this negative stuff. So I said, Walter, what do you propose? Well, as long as you don't propose to me. And what followed then was a 2-hour conversation. And I said at the end of it, you know something, Walter, we have to have this conversation live. So, Walter,
hello.
Thanks very much for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And you know I only said this because I have the highest respect for you.
Oh, thank you.
No, and you are putting stuff out there that is so important, stuff that's not on television, not in the media. It's of real importance to real people all over the country. And you know I've just been through an election process as a candidate of in the European elections, and I learned so much during that process. But what you're doing is so important, and it's so important for the likes of little people like me who have no political background and little money, but a huge passion for making Ireland better and making the world better, and a dream for doing all of this sort of stuff. So that's why I got onto you that day.
Yes.
You have a platform for everybody, whereas the main media only have a platform for those who are paying the money to do so.
Yes. Well, when I say that I have a platform, I would say that my platform is very much Middle Ireland, because the people that are on my page really are the heart and soul of this country.
Absolutely.
You know, I put up a post yesterday congratulating Akilele on winning the 2 medals.
Yes,
and,
super.
You know, and you know, in the space of a couple of hours, you know, 400 people had liked the post,
yes,
which is fantastic.
Yes.
Which show, you know, there's just so much negativity on social media. People to the left, people to the right, fighting each other. I suppose the platform that I have is a platform for Middle Ireland.
May I just add that from my little village in Churchtown in North Cork, we had Aoife O'Sullivan in the same games, and she was in the top 12 in Europe.
Oh.
And she's living in Churchtown. Both her parents are from Valentia Island in Kerry.
Okay.
So they were at the same games, and it was wonderful games, wasn't it?
It is, and I suppose that is what's positive about Ireland.
Yes.
That we have such an incredible, rich heritage, music, singing, dance, sport, literature, that, you know, we really do punch above our weight.
Absolutely.
On a global stage.
Yeah.
But things are not going well for this country at the minute.
No.
You know, I'm in Longford, and the news this week that the power stations are shutting down. Now, I know that they are peat burning, but it's going to have massive repercussions for people living in the Midlands, because you know, the bogs actually was the lifeblood of the Midlands.
Yes.
And then we have Richard Bruton and his climate change report coming out saying that we're going to have to get rid of the suckler herd, which is to get rid of the suckler farmer, which
That is complete nonsense.
Yes,
You know,
you
I'm an agricultural scientist.
Yes.
I studied in UCD, and I'm a farmer's son, and I've been part-time farming most of my life. But can we just deal with that maybe
Yes.
straight away?
Okay.
You know, with forestry, they work out the carbon credits of forestry, etc., etc. With suckler farming and beef farming and dairy or sheep, whatever, they calculate the emissions and everything, but they don't calculate all the carbon dioxide, the carbon intake of all the grass growing, the crops growing, the hedges growing. 6.4% of Ireland has hedges in it, and nothing of that. And these are the hedges between the fields that the suckler cows and everything are grazing. So there's this whole carbon intake through photosynthesis of everything that's growing, and that's not calculated. And now they are blaming suckler farmers. You know, it's the most natural, carbon neutral farming that you can imagine.
Yes.
But the economists, and it's partly due to the UN came out with some stupid figures, not taking all that into account. And that is why they're using, the calculations are all wrong.
Yeah, Professor John Fitzgerald is on record. He wrote in the Times this week, suggesting that we should continue with our dairy herd, which has been increasing exponentially.
That's right.
But that we should get rid of the suckler farmer. And what people don't realise is that if you remove the cattle and the grass was just to go wild, it will decay and release carbon dioxide and contribute to climate change. By actually having cattle graze the land, we're actually mitigating against carbon emissions.
They actually did that on the Burren in County Clare years ago. They started taking all the cattle off it, and all the herbage went wrong, and all the wildflowers that are so important in the Burren. So they actually had to reintroduce the cattle. It was quite interesting.
Okay, so the other big issues, I suppose, that were in the news this week was the RTE expose of what happened in the hide and seek creche here in Dublin. There was also a report on 1,000+ people with very serious mental health issues being held in residential units around the country, some of them actually sleeping on torn mattresses on the floor. We have the issue of our elderly lying on trolleys in the hospitals. We have the homeless crisis, the housing crisis. It goes on and on. Things are really, really broken in our country. And, they say that the essence of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And we are guilty of that as a nation. We keep re-electing the same politicians and engaging in the same way with the political process over and over again, expecting different results. So what do you suggest?
Well, it's quite interesting, because the reason I went for election, I got this sort of calling to go for election without any background in politics. And when I realised there were over 10,000 people homeless, that really got me in here. I said, I had some time, I need to try and make a difference. But the interesting thing is, you talk about homelessness to people and they're not that interested. You don't get a lot of votes by talking about homelessness to people, or a lot of the problems in the country. It doesn't get you votes, put it like that. So the problem is the system isn't changing, because it's very hard for new people to get into the political system. Okay,
if I can just hold you there. So you've had first-hand experience of recently knocking on people's doors, and you know first-hand what people were saying to you. What were the issues that were coming up at the doorstep?
A lot of people sort of blame the homeless people for their own situation.
Yes.
And I know, because I've had my ups and downs in business and life and all the rest of it. If you haven't been down, you don't understand what it's like to be down. So people that have never been down there don't understand that they're only a week away from losing their house or their home or something like that. And things go wrong in life for some people, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault.
Okay. So, but what were the issues that people were raising with you?
Ooh, it's a difficult one because they weren't raising a lot of issues. It was amazing, you know. Even at the big meetings and the hustings, there were about 7 big hustings in Ireland South.
Yes.
And I was trying to explain about the international trade deals. That was the other thing I'm very strong on, that Mercosur and CETA, and that these were really bad for Ireland, and we were going to lose our beef trade because of it, our beef industry. But nobody was really listening. I don't know, there was this big offer of 100 million, which was to come to the beef farmers because of the effect of Brexit over the last 6 or 8 months. And that was the issue. How soon could we get this 100 million, and how would it be given to different types of farmers, and would it be given to dairy farmers if they also had cattle, or would it be given to suckler farmers or beef finishers or whatever?
Okay. So
that was it. I suppose there was a lot of stuff about Brexit as well, you know, the whole time. That came up a little bit, but I suppose what I found being at all the meetings, I was on stage with the present MEPs at the time, and the TDs and the councillors and the senators. There were very few outside the political system that were actually going for election. And what I found is a lot of the serial politicians, we'll put it that way, the sort of people that never did a day's work in their lives, you know,
yes,
they didn't know about stuff. They didn't know about renewable energy. They hadn't been to renewable energy technologies around you know, they seem to just talk, and there wasn't a depth of knowledge about how to have solutions to everything, you know.
Okay, so
and even, dare I say, even the Green Party, lovely people, you know, even Grace O'Sullivan, who got in as an MEP, lovely person, you know. But the Green Party need to learn more about the technologies. You know, they just talk about these overarching sort of figures and dreams of sort of blah blah blah, but they don't actually know how to solve things, you know.
Okay, so if we can just drill into a few of the things that you've said there. So what I'm hearing from you is that you encountered huge apathy among the electorate.
That's a very good way of putting it, yes.
They just couldn't care less. And that the politicians just turned up at the gig. Those that were already elected knew that it was more or less a given that they were going to be re-elected.
Some of them, yes.
Some of them did. And then for those like yourself who were trying to create a platform to discuss issues, you weren't being met with...
I was very disappointed with the media. I was very disappointed with the Irish Examiner and the Independent, and a lot of what they wrote about was the tit-for-tat stuff between candidates within parties.
Right.
You know, you had things in Ireland South, that some of the Fine Gael candidates, there were 3 of them, so it was who could go to this meeting and who could go to that meeting. So that's what they were actually writing about, rather than writing about the issues and making the issues interesting for the public and developing a conversation all about them and everything. But that didn't happen. And of course, when it came to RTE and TV3, which is now, I think, Virgin Media or whatever, they just put on the MEPs and the TDs and the councillors and senators. They didn't allow little people, as I say, like me, and to be on television. And if you're not known, nobody's going to vote for you. So this is just coming back to the situation. How do people get into politics? How can we change stuff in the country? And this is coming back to what you do, Anna,
yes,
which is so important, because you get out to the real people in the country through social media, which is fantastic.
Right. Okay, so we take it then that we can't rely on social media to give us the information that we need to be hearing about the real issues. They're more concerned with human interest stories, which obviously
Yes.
sells papers,
Yes.
gets people to tune in. But I think that there is a huge need for people to start having conversations
Yes.
around the kind of country that we now want to create for our children. And just to pick up there on what you said there about the homeless, people weren't interested because it didn't affect them.
No.
And I'm just thinking of what happened in Longford back in 2002, 2003. The ESB subcontracted Gamma, which was a Turkish company, to build that power station in Lanesborough, and the workers were housed in containers that were stacked one on top of the other, with absolutely no sanitation, no proper facilities. They were paid €2 a day, and when Joe Higgins, the Socialist TD, raised the issue in the Dáil, you may recall or remember Conor Lenihan shouting across the Dáil chamber, "You're getting very fond of kebabs."
All right.
In which case he did actually have to apologise.
Yes,
you know.
yes,
So this, so the day that the power station in Lanesborough was opened, those workers actually staged a protest because they hadn't actually been paid.
Wow.
And nobody cared about this.
I know.
Nobody cared about it.
Yeah.
And I never forgot it. And
I sort of,
was
you're
just,
bringing it all back to me now. I remember
I
it
never
at the time.
forgot it because it was horrendous. And I
Yes.
was aware of it at the time and I followed the story. But what people don't realise is this, that the issues that are affecting people on the margin today may well be the issues that are going to be affecting you tomorrow. So this idea
But they
that you-
don't believe that.
the idea
Yeah.
that you can mistreat workers that seed was sown back in 2002, 2003, 2004 by the ESB, and they got away with it. And because they were Turkish workers, nobody batted an eyelid.
Yes.
But now they're treating Irish workers in the exact same way.
That's right. Yeah.
And you know, if we had stood up more to what was happening back then, perhaps, and I suspect, that the workers in Longford and Offaly and Westmeath and you know, in Laois that are employed by Bord na Móna and the ESB wouldn't be in the situation that they're in today.
Yes.
And
But we're a quiet kind of a nation. We don't revolt. You know, I mean, you can see what French farmers do when things go wrong. You know,
Yes.
they block all the roundabouts and they block the main roads and they block the cities and all the rest of it. I mean, we're a lovely nation. We're lovely people. That's why the world comes on holidays here as well.
Yes.
You know, we're not that type of person, which is a great thing. You know, well, I'm not saying anything against the French now or anything,
Yes.
but you know, Irish people are lovely people.
well, the problem with the Irish is this, I feel, is that you have individual groups of people that are fighting on issues. And I don't know whether it's a case of the powers that be planting people in these organisations, but somehow or another, there's always a couple of people within these groups that will sow the seeds of dissension. And they end up
Yes.
fighting with each other, and the whole thing fizzles out.
Well,
And
I
it's
notice the government at the moment are trying to divide people. I've been watching this very closely, especially Leo Varadkar. Everything he does, he tries to divide people. It's this divide and conquer sort of business. They're back to sort of doing
Yes.
all that kind of stuff, you know.
Yes.
And you know, you spoke about the homelessness. People hadn't much interest in the homelessness. They didn't have much interest in those Turkish workers back then. People are quite annoyed by people earning a basic living through social welfare. There's a lot of stuff not said out in the country, you know, and I suppose this is why Peter Casey did quite well in the presidential election, you know, that there's an awful lot of stuff not said, and there are an awful lot of people at work and paying tax that are they're not happy about.
They're squeezed. they're what's called a squeezed
they're
middle.
completely squeezed.
Yeah, they get nothing.
They haven't a tenner at the end of the week to
That's
buy a
right.
pint, or just enjoy themselves, or and
Yeah.
they have to have their cars, they have to drive to work, they have to
Father
have their
Sean-
mortgages,
yeah. Father Sean Healy from Social Justice Ireland would call these the working poor. And SIPTU did a survey of young workers under the age of 35 last year. And I have posted this a few times. And the shocking thing is that over half of these young people reported that they are going hungry in order to meet their rent payments or their mortgage payments. And that's
especially
really
here
shocking.
in Dublin.
Yes.
I met a guy in Cork the other day. He changed jobs and he went to Cork, but he was earning 2,300 a month or something, and his accommodation went up to 2,000 in Dublin, and he loved his job here in Dublin, but he had to leave. Sure, he had nothing to live on, absolutely nothing to live on.
There's a growing number of people living in tents out at the Phoenix Park and along the canals, and the outreach workers are reporting that quite a number of these people are actually working. They get up every day and go to work and return in the evening because they're in low paid jobs.
But Dublin's getting too big.
Yes.
The infrastructure isn't here. It's crazy that all the industry, all the new companies, it's all coming to Dublin. We've got a fantastic airport in Shannon, and it's not being used at all, except for the American army bases, But that's what it's become. We should be developing the whole country. We've got a great airport in Cork, super one in Shannon, and we've Knock, and we've little one in Waterford, and little one in Donegal, and everywhere, and Farranfore down in Kerry, fantastic little airport. And you've got the likes of Foynes Port in Limerick, and we've got fantastic infrastructure all over the country, and it's crazy that all the development. But you can see politically at the moment, everything is Dublin, money.
Yes.
It's
now the population of the Shannon Basin is actually greater than the population of Dublin, and you have, as you say, Dublin growing out of control, and then the Shannon Basin, the villages are becoming deserted villages. It's like the Oliver Goldsmith's the 18th century poet, writing about the deserted village. It's back to that again. So that brings us on to the title of our talk, Dreaming the Dream. Dreaming, everything, all inventions begin with somebody imagining. It begins in the imagination. So we need to start dreaming. Martin Luther, had that great speech, I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. I think we need to start having a conversation around the dream that we have for our future. How would we like to see Ireland in 2030? And that's just 11 years from now.
Only around the corner.
It's only around the corner. So, what would be your dream for Ireland in 2030?
Well, I think we need to get positive about our nation again, and our people and our culture, as you said earlier on, and our music and our, business.
That's not going to put bread and butter on the table.
No, we need to. So we've spoken before. My whole dream for Ireland is to be self-sufficient in food and energy, and renewable energy. And I spent a good few years in renewable energy, traveling all over the continent, looking at all different technologies. And we did this amazing report, 2 other engineers and myself. And I asked 3 questions. How much renewable energy can we produce? How many jobs can we create? And how many hundreds of thousands of tons of greenhouse gases can we stop putting into the atmosphere by doing this? And it was a huge eye-opener just by doing, the different renewable energies like anaerobic digestion, tidal, not so much wind. Everyone thinks of wind straight away. Getting energy from all the the water that's flowing in this country, all the rivers and the streams and all the rest of it.
Okay, can I hold you there? Because this is what really made me latch on to what you had to say that morning.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So, just to state, yourself and 2 engineers, and are their backgrounds in energy?
Oh yeah, we were working in renewable energy at the time. So
you were working?
Yes, one was a graduate of renewable energy in CIT in Cork.
Yes.
Great young
Yes.
man. And another guy had sort of come from the waste to energy industry. So, they really knew their stuff.
So
they
the,
really
the
knew their
three of
stuff.
you then were working together on creating a plan for making Ireland self-sufficient in energy.
So we produced this biopower report.
Right.
Eamon Ryan actually launched it for us in Dublin. This was 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. The technology is there the whole time. So, and we did all the figures, and we realized from a whole, it's all about a mix of technologies. It's not just wind, or it's not just tidal, or it's not just this. It's a mix of technologies. And we could produce twice the amount of energy that we use in Ireland with renewable resources. We could produce 80,000 full-time sustainable jobs.
80,000?
Mostly in rural Ireland, 80,000 jobs. And we could offset millions of tons of greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. So this is where I want to come at climate change. We have to face everything from a different angle. But this is what, and Eamon Ryan and the Green Party knew all about this 10 years ago. These technologies have been here for ages.
Okay, so let me hold you there. So you have this beautiful bound copy.
Yes.
It's been studied, obviously, by Eamon Ryan of the Green Party before he was going to launch it, because he wasn't going to launch something that was going to damage his reputation.
Yep.
So
we're on the news. We're on the 6 o'clock news and everything with it.
You were on the 6 o'clock news.
But this, and I met Brian Cowan when he was Taoiseach. I met him down in County Clare, kind of cornered him one evening, and I was chatting away to him, and he, let's forget about politics for a minute.
Yeah.
Brian Cowan is a clever guy.
Yes.
I think he was one of the best brains. I don't think he should ever have been Taoiseach. But anyway, we'll put that aside. And all these Fianna Fáil fellows were trying to say, come on, we have to go on to the next thing. And Brian Cowan very nicely said, no, Walter has something here that's important. And that was a wet Monday night in County Clare. And the following Friday, I was in his office with his chief environmental guy, in Dublin. And he organised all this during the week. It was very exciting. I was very excited at the time.
Yes.
But then the environmental fella said, listen, there's been lots of people like you coming up with the same solutions, but politically they never.
It went nowhere.
It goes they go nowhere. They constantly go nowhere.
Okay, and so can I just hold you there?
Okay, sorry, I get quite excited about this.
So for those of you who have just joined me, I'm here in conversation with Walter Ryan-Purcell, and Walter was a candidate in the recent European elections. He ran in the Munster constituency, and I'm having a chat here with him about what kind of Ireland we imagine for 2030. And what he's after saying there is actually riveting. That along with 2 other engineers, he came up with a report which was launched by Eamon Ryan of the Green Party. He had a private audience with Brian Cowan, who was Taoiseach at the time, and they produced this report that showed that Ireland could be completely self-sufficient in renewable energy. We could produce all our energy by renewable means. And then it all ended up in a bottle of smoke. It went no place. And the reason for that is because of the politicians. So, Walter, in the light now of the fact that the Midlands is in crisis, there is no doubt about it, the Midlands is in crisis. There was a big meeting in Lanesborough this week, attended by a load of politicians, and these are men who are losing their jobs in Bord Namona, and they're losing their jobs in the power station in Lanesborough and the power station in Shannon Bridge. And obviously the blueprint that you have there, if it was, the plan of action there, if it was actually implemented, it could provide employment for these men. You're claiming that 80,000 jobs could be created. So
even if it was 30,000 jobs or 40,000 jobs, and it's the next generation coming up, and it's people getting educated in renewable energy in all the institutes of technology all over the country, and it's and you can imagine that tens of thousands of jobs, around the country, and what it would do for the villages and the towns and everything. I mean, this will happen. This will happen. That's just that it will happen.
Yes, and it needs to happen. Now, you mentioned one thing there, anaerobic digestion, and that is a no-brainer. Like all the technologies that we need are already invented. Now, anaerobic digestion, I live beside a piggery that produces the same amount of slurry as the sewage of Limerick City. And I have campaigned for the last 15 years for an anaerobic digester to be built. And basically what it is that the slurry is fed into a sealed tank that generates methane gas that's fed into a generator which generates electricity, which will be enough to power the piggery and power probably hundreds of houses around the piggery.
And heat.
Yeah, the liquid is taken off. It's odorless and colourless, spread on the land. It has all the nutrients, so we're not.
And it doesn't pollute because it's broken down.
Yes, and and the solid matter then is dried, and you have the compost for horticulture.
They're absolutely no-brainers. There are 5,000 of these. There were 5,000 of these in Germany 10 years ago, when I was travelling around Germany looking at them all. We got full planning permission for one in Roscommon, and I was looking at 10 sites all around Ireland at the time.
And I'm going to give you a laugh. James Bannon was Fine Gael TD in our local village.
Yes.
And I went to him with this idea of the anaerobic digester. He didn't know anything about it. In fairness to him, he familiarised himself with it. He travelled down to the Camp Hill community in Kilkenny that had one of the first biodigesters in the country. And he brought the proposal to Eamon Ryan, who was Minister for Energy at the time. And I had that much documentation back from James Bannon, the correspondence between himself and Eamon Ryan on this issue. And in the following budget, the government gave a tax break to hospitals to install an anaerobic digester.
Okay.
Like,
all right. I know.
The last people in the country that were going to build anaerobic digesters were hospitals. That tax break needed to be given to farmers.
By the way, the ESB has a huge role to play in this, in my opinion. Every farmer can have a really good secondary income, every single farmer all over the country, in producing energy as well as food. I mean, this is huge. So you could have micro-generation. You don't have to have these huge big windmills. You can have these, you can have small windmills producing a little bit of energy the whole time. Photovoltaic has got to be a really good value technology in the last number of years. It was a bit expensive 10 years ago. So producing electricity from the sun, and the sun doesn't have to be out, So usually when the sun is out, it's not that windy, and when it's windy, the sun isn't out. So with hydroelectricity as well, from
running water.
I mean, there's so much energy you can produce from, and all the technology is there, and it's not killing the fish anymore, and it's all worked out years ago. But the ESB, we as a nation need to pay for this electricity that's being generated, and that's what hasn't been done in the last 10 years. and there's a certain inertia about this. And if we could get the ESB on side,
but there's
you know,
too
but,
many
but the ESB is 95% owned by our nation,
yes,
and 5% owned by the employees of ESB.
Yeah.
But we should be getting them to do this.
but there's too many vested interests.
Of course
Now,
there are,
I want to kind of send a shout out to the farmer in Roscommon that I met during the week. And I'm useless on names, but I was having a cup of coffee in the filling station in Carrick-on-Shannon, and this man came up to me. He recognised me from Facebook. He sat down, he had a chat with me, and he is a beef farmer, and he just said, you know, and I sympathised with him and I agreed with him. There's no future in beef farming in Ireland. The prices had just been slashed. His cattle finished, and the factory won't take them. So I hope you're listening, and if you are listening, could you make contact with me on Facebook Messenger, because I'd like to have that conversation with you again. So there's so much doom and gloom around farming in Ireland, and the people saying that there's no future in it. And here we have Walter saying that farmers need to think outside the box, that it's not just about producing food, it is about producing energy, and this can be done
and they've
easily.
They've no problem thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
The farmers of Ireland are fantastic people,
Yes.
and it's just we need the political will, obviously, and the ESB paying for the energy that they're producing and all that.
Yes.
And just on the beef side of things, and Brexit and everything, I think we should think completely different about Brexit and England and all that. I think I honestly, and I don't want people jumping down my throat on this now. Let's just all try and think on a wider level than a lot of the thought processes that are going on at the moment. England can feed about 2/3 of its population. They can feed about 40 million people. There are 63 million people living there. If Ireland is the breadbasket for England, it's a huge opportunity for us to produce a huge amount of food to feed the 23 million that they can't feed in England. You know, we're right beside them. You know, Brexit could be a huge opportunity for us, not this terrible thing.
You know, because we're members of the EU, we're tied into EU rules. So are we going to be allowed to trade without barriers with the UK? That's the big difficulty.
Yes, we need a customs union with the UK when they split. That's the whole point.
And can we do that?
If we could get that for food, if we could get it for food alone, you know, that would be major. And that's what we should be achieving at the moment, you know.
Just speaking about food, and I'm guilty of this myself. You know, I'm on a pension, on a very limited income, and I go into the big multiples and I do my shop, and I try to buy Irish when I can. And because I knew I was having this conversation, was going to have this conversation with you today, I was saying, there's no point in me talking. I have to start walking the walk.
Yes.
And I have to start, you know, my lifestyle is going to have to change, because the change has to begin with me. So I'm going to have to start consciously making the effort of buying locally produced food.
This is very difficult because 80 or 90% of all the vegetables and everything are imported at this stage. Now we need to be producing all of this, obviously. It's not.
Yes, and we can produce it ourselves.
Yeah, but there's a whole way we can start producing it and everything. And I know I mentioned to you my plan. I wrote a plan about, God, it must be 10 years ago, and I presented it to Minister O'Keefe at the time, and that was to set up a co-op in every parish in the country, urban and rural.
Right, and back to the co-op system.
Well, it might be a different co-op system, it might be slightly different, but just have a co-op in every country, in every parish in the country. And it's coming back to what we were talking about in the beginning. The taxpayer hates people getting social welfare and not working for it and everything. And if there was a co-op in every parish, rather than getting social welfare, you're actually working for the co-op. You're working for the co-op. You're producing food, and you're producing energy, and you're producing other stuff, urban and rural. So nobody actually gets social welfare. You actually work for your local co-op in your own parish. And my plan for this is it's not only people on social welfare. It's also, we've got so many people now that are retired early, retired
like
young.
myself.
God, I'm meeting so many people. I was in a pub in Killarney last night, and I met a fella and his wife from Mayo, and he was only a young man, and he used to work with the HSE, and he's retired. And I actually ask a lot of people now, a lot of young retirees, if there was a co-op in your parish, would you work 10 hours or would you work 20? You know, would you work some hours per week, producing food, producing energy, getting involved? And I think the most important thing of all in this vision, this dream I have of this co-op in every parish, is that nobody knows who's getting it because they're on social welfare. You know.
Yes.
So there's no demeaning anybody. You know, everybody is pulling together, but you know, but it means that people are earning their social welfare, you know, by working in their local co-op and producing the food that you want to buy that's not available at the moment.
Yeah, and there's a few things I want to say. The first thing that I want to say is I said to myself, well, I may not be able to buy all of my goods, but if I put some stuff into my basket that's locally produced, then I'm helping that local producer to stay in business. And one of the things that I put in my basket was actually milk from Leitrim.
Yes.
There's a farmer in Leitrim that's producing unpasteurised raw milk that has been untreated, and it comes in a glass bottle like the old fashioned.
It's unpasteurised?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's unpasteurised, and I'm not too sure. But beautiful milk, absolutely beautiful milk, like what we knew.
There's a great fella in Dunmanway doing it as well, and there's Ardfirth in Kerry, and the lovely glass bottles and everything. Yeah.
So if we start putting, if everybody started putting some locally produced food into their basket, okay, it is more expensive, but at least you know that you're contributing to somebody else's job. That's the first thing. The second thing is your idea of the co-op, that it's to produce food and energy so that every village and every local village is self-sufficient in food and energy. I would also expand that out to say that there are other needs that a community have, like quality childcare. So instead of children being put into a big, massive, industrialised creche, that you would have retired people like myself that would go and volunteer for 10 or 12 hours in the week to mind the children in the creche, and that could be free, which would allow mothers to and fathers to you know, one less expense. Also, it could be a place for the elderly that people could volunteer to go in. There's such a huge crisis now with home help.
Yes.
There's the HSE is saying that they can't afford home help, and people they're bed blockers. They're in the hospital for months on end because they can't go home because there isn't enough money in the other arm of the HSE to provide a home help. So home help for the elderly is another service that could be provided. You know. And even in little villages like Ballylongford in North Kerry, or you know, or places in Longford, which God, you go into some little villages in Longford and there's nothing going on, is there? Yes.
You know, and around the country, but you could have a little cafe.
Yes.
You know, and you can link this. I worked for 2 years in a cafe in Kerry. It was run by Kerry Down Syndrome, and we had 40 young adults with Down syndrome working 2, 3 and 4 hour shifts every week. and it was absolutely incredible. And everyone can do this, but you can see now, if there was a sort of a basis of a co-op in each parish, you can see what can be achieved.
Oh yes.
And then you don't have people just getting social welfare, they're actually being paid. And I think
they have their dignity.
No, but even they have the dignity, but I think even the young retirees on low pensions, I mean, if they were able to do 5 hours a week even and get €50, that €50 makes a huge difference every week to just having a bit of fun or spending it in the cafe that's being run by the co-op or whatever. And then, a lot of people are suffering hugely with mental health at the moment. Mental health is
a big thing.
It's a big problem. Our home farm in Churchtown is leased out to a group called Shlí Ella, the Irish for another way, and there are people that have come out of institutions, and they spend 18 months roughly there, and they've 3 polytunnels, and they've half an acre of vegetables. They rent 50 acres off us. They've a herd of Aberdeen Angus sucklers. They've a bakery. They supply the local super value. Every Saturday morning, there's a cafe and a farmer's market in the yard. This is a model that can be used for so many, even the co-ops and everything. But yeah, we just need people with vision, but we need people in power with vision as well, obviously,
We need people in power. But do you know what? I'm beginning to think that part of our downfall in Ireland is that everybody is waiting for somebody else to do it.
That's the thing. And is there a way of doing it outside the political system? I'm not
That's
sure.
That's the next thing that I was about.
Certainly from a media point of view, what you're doing is outside the normal media system, which is so important.
Yes.
But from the renewable energy side of it and everything, we need the ESB to pay for the energy to all the farmers that are producing it, etc., etc. So that's my quandary at the moment. I can't I'd love to do it. I'd love to just forget about the political system and just let's all do it. But you actually can't without.
Well, now
I'm not sure whether you can or not.
Well,
I just
actually,
don't know.
and I think, we Irish have the art of the conversation, but it is an art it's an art form that has been dying out. We spend too much time on our phones and social media, watching television or whatever, and we're not having enough conversations. I think we need to go back to having conversations. And I suppose the very fact that you are tuned into this conversation and have stuck with it shows that you are interested in the art of conversation. I think that we need to begin to realise that we do have all the solutions. We don't need to invent anything. All that's required now is for us to start living the dream. We have the dream. Now we need to start living it. And I put up a post yesterday, and it was one of the most interesting articles that I've read in a long time. This professor in Harvard University has studied revolutions around the world going back many decades. And
I saw that.
Yes, very, very interesting.
Yes.
And what she has discovered is that quiet, peaceful demonstrations are more likely to succeed than violent ones. And the interesting thing is that in all of her research, she discovered the 3.5% rule.
Yes.
In other words, every single revolution that engaged 3.5% of the population succeeded. There was nowhere, she couldn't find a single, now I'm just remembering this off the top of my head, I don't think she could find a single revolution with 3.5% of the population engaged that didn't succeed. So I immediately took out my calculator and going on the 2016 census, We need 168,000 people in Ireland to get this change up and running. We don't need, violence or anything
God,
like
no,
that.
certainly not.
We just need people to say, the politicians are useless. They're not doing it for us. We're going to have to do it for ourselves.
Some of them are great, but there's a lot of nonsense going on there at the moment.
Yeah.
They're very weak. Just weak politicians.
So I'm going to wrap up this conversation, Walter.
Okay. We could go on forever.
We could go on forever. And but I have to say that morning when I was on the phone to you, I came off the phone feeling very energized.
Oh, good.
And I have to say that you've had the same effect on me today.
Oh, good.
I feel.
Let's start.
Yeah, I feel very positive, and I feel very positive and very energized that we do have a vision for Ireland, and that vision is that we need to make every local community self-sufficient in energy and in food production. And the other big thing is that farmers need to start thinking outside the box, that it's not just about producing food, it's also about producing energy, and there are a multitude ways of producing renewable energy using technologies that are already invented. But the important thing then is to get the ESB on board to buy that energy from the farmers. And I suppose really the last thing that I want to say is that, in the words of Gandhi, the change has to begin with me. I have to be the change that I want to see happening, and I have to be one of the 168,000 people that's needed to bring about change in this country. So thank you so much for watching. I've been in conversation with Walter Ryan from Cork, and I'd ask you now, please, once again, if you haven't already done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's completely free, it won't cost you a thing. I need 1,000 subscribers to be able to go out live on YouTube, and that will get me out to a wider audience.
How do they actually subscribe?
How do they subscribe? Well, I will put up a link to a trailer, and that will bring you onto my YouTube channel, and there's just a subscribe button. It's kind of self-explanatory at the end of the trailer, and there's a little bell, and you click on that, and it means that any time that I'm going live that you will get a notification.
Okay.
And this is not to promote myself at all. It's just that I have a platform there with you. There are 16,000 of you now, and I don't see this as my page, I see this as our page and our platform, where we can share our views and share our ideas for how we can create a better future for our children and our grandchildren. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again. Thank you very much.